In episode 3, Joyce goes to the bank to get the money, but when she returns, she has to act like it's business as usual with the kids. The kids get home from the roller skating rink, and it's pretty awkward because, 11 just took a size 11 to some girl's face. They don't bring it up to Joyce, though, or Murray for that matter. And they're surprised to see Murray, but Murray made risotto, so let's party. Joyce tells the family that she has to head to Alaska for work. The Britannicas are up there. While she's away, Jonathan will be in charge, which is an interesting choice because Jonathan is baked out of his mind. Eventually, they do end up bringing up what happened at the roller skating rink, but they don't bring up the fact that it was 11 who did it. And 11 gets so uncomfortable with the conversation, but also Mike's reaction to it, that she just gets up and leaves the dinner table. The next day, Joyce and Murray head off on a plane to Alaska to try to get Hopper back. And Hopper has gotten word from Enzo that he was able to get in contact with Joyce. Hopper is a prisoner in Kamchatka, Russia, where he's building a railroad for the motherland. Enzo tells him that Joyce is showing up in 2 days. This is going to be a win-win because he's going to be smuggled back to the States and Enzo's going to end up being rich. But part of this is going to be on Hopper. He has to find a way on that plane. Enzo's not really going to help him with that. Problem is, Hopper is chained up. So he comes up with the idea of getting help from a fellow prisoner. He bribes him with food, and he has the prisoner smash his ankle up. It's a pretty painful process, but it's going to allow Hopper to get the one leg shackle off. From there, he can hopefully hitch the ride with the smuggler. Back in Lenora, though, things aren't going great for Hopper's daughter. 11 is made to feel like a monster for what she did to Angela. And the next day, at breakfast, she still isn't coming down. It prompts Mike to go up there and see how she's doing. And Mike can't figure out why 11 wasn't just honest with him and tell him that she was having a hard time. After all, Mike's always been a nerd. He's always been made fun of. But 11 points out, no, you have no idea what I'm going through. This is different. I don't belong. They also get into a conversation about their relationship because 11 feels like Mike is kind of over her. He stopped using the big L word, love. Mike thinks she's just being ridiculous and overreacting to the whole thing. But then they hear a commotion downstairs. And that's because the police have shown up with a warrant looking for Jane Hopper. After what she pulled at the skating rink, she's going to have to answer for her crime. In front of all of the neighbors, she gets escorted out in cuffs. She's driven down to the police station and questioned about what she did. And she's brutally honest with the cops. She owns up to it. And when they ask her, did you want to kill Angela? She just says, I don't know. 11 shows absolutely no remorse for what she did. She's processed and eventually sent to a juvenile detention center. When the cops took her away, Mike, Will, and Jonathan were right behind her. They tried to see her, but they were told by the woman at the precinct that only a parent or guardian is allowed to see a minor, so there wasn't a lot they could do. As they're leaving, they actually saw her being taken away to the juvenile detention center. But on her way there, her transport is stopped by 3 cars, and a woman gets out, flashes a government badge, and tells the officers, we'll take her from here. And when she gets out of the transport, Dr. Owens is waiting for her. After Russia invaded America without his knowing, Dr. Owens was fired. He was perfectly content living out his life in Utah when Lieutenant Colonel Sullivan shows up. Sullivan was the guy from the military that the police called in to take a look at Chrissy's mangled body. Sullivan shows Dr. Owens the pictures of Chrissy and explains what happened and asks if any of this rings a bell, and it doesn't. But what he does tell Colonel Sullivan is that something is going on in Hawkins, Indiana that no one understands. And a military response is not the answer. But Sullivan thinks he does have an answer for it. It's 11. He looks at everything that's happened in Hawkins as pointing back to 11, and not in a good way. He tells Dr. Owens, Brenner trained her for this very thing, remote assassinations. So we need to find her immediately. Even though Dr. Owens knows exactly where 11 is, he plays dumb to Sullivan, telling him that 11 is dead, and even if she was alive, she's not capable of this. But Lieutenant Colonel Owens is not so sure. He's heard whispers that 11 is actually alive, and that maybe Dr. Owens might know where she is. Dr. Owens puts on a great acting performance, acting outraged that he was even accused of this. So with Dr. Owens not playing ball, Sullivan has a bunch of his men raid the Owens household and take any kind of computer or files they have because he's on a mission to find 11. Owens realized that he needed to get to her first. With 11 safely in his custody, he takes her to a diner to get some food but explains what's going on. Her main concern is what happened at the roller skating rink, but Owens tells her, we'll get rid of that. That has nothing to do with why I'm here. Now, Hawkins is in danger. Whatever you've dealt with before, it just continues to come back stronger. And there's a war that's going to come to Hawkins. Hawkins needs you. And I know that's not fair to you, but I wouldn't be here if I thought there'd be any other way of doing this. He also explains that there are others out there who believe that she is the problem, but Owens doesn't. He believes she's the cure. She reminds Owens that she no longer has powers, and that's when he says, what if there was a way that we could get your powers back, and you'd be even stronger? With her friends and Hawkins in danger, she agrees to help. As Dr. Owens and 11 head off to Hawkins, Indiana, he sends the government types to go pick up Will, Mike, and Jonathan. But back in Hawkins, people are still on the lookout for Eddie. That includes Jason and the rest of the basketball team. Lucas comes out and sees the basketball team gearing up with weapons, and Jason gives him an out, saying, look, man, if you're not up for this, it's okay. You'll still be one of us. But Lucas tells him, no, I'm good. Let's go find him. And they head off. The first place they stop is a garage where members of Hellfire practice their band. They're very surprised to see Lucas, but Lucas has to play dumb, acting like the only reason why he knows them is because of his sister. Even though Jason originally told Lucas that they only want to talk, and they're not killers like Eddie, they decide to choose violence anyway when the members of the Hellfire tell Jason that they don't know where Eddie is. They throw the nerds down and threaten to break their hand, and eventually one of them reveals that Dustin was looking for Eddie, and maybe Dustin found him, so go check there. So Jason, Lucas, and the rest of the basketball team head off to try to find Lucas's old friend. Eddie, by the way, is still camped out at Reefer Rick's place. Max, Dustin, Robin, and Steve stop by and let him know that the good news is nobody knows that he's wanted for murder. The bad news is the cops are, in fact, convinced that he's the one who did it. What they have to do is kill Vecna and just prove his innocence, which is not going to be easy to do. They then hear police sirens, but luckily for them, it's not coming for them. It's going to investigate Fred, whose body is still on the road and was recently found by the police. Dustin and the gang follow the sirens to see what's going on, and that's when they see Nancy answering questions to the police. They're able to get her attention, and they head off back to the trailer park to tell each what the other knows about what's going on. What they can't figure out, though, is why Vecna is doing what he's doing. And Nancy points out that Fred and Chrissy really don't make sense. Why them? They couldn't be more opposite. Nancy lets him know that Fred was acting weird, like he was on edge and upset. And Max points out that Chrissy was upset, but it was back at school. She was crying. That's when Robin mentions how usually when you're hunted by a serial killer, the serial killer makes himself known. Maybe they saw Vecna and they were kind of traumatized by it. Steve tells him that it's weird that they never mentioned this. And Max says, well, if you mentioned it to the police, they think you're crazy. But maybe they mentioned it to their shrink. I did see Chrissy leaving the guidance counselor's office. So they go to try to get some answers from the guidance counselor, but Nancy starts walking away, and Steve right away says, where are you going? And Nancy says, I'm just going to go check on a hunch. I don't want to waste your time. But Steve gets very concerned that she's going off alone with this Vecna monster on the loose. The problem is, Steve is the only one of that group with a license, so he has to stay with Dustin and Max. Robin heads off with Nancy. And the two head off to the library to try to look up everything they can on the Victor Creel situation. Although Robin is driving Nancy nuts. But they start combing through all the archives, just trying to find any hint of anything. Meanwhile, Max, Steve, and Dustin head to the guidance counselor's house. Max is able to get in by asking if she can talk. And at first she starts talking about her own situation and why she's seeing the guidance counselor. But then she moves into what happened with Chrissy. The guidance counselor doesn't want to give up any information because it's just a confidential matter. And even goes so far as to tell Max, would you like it if I told a student about what we talk about? And Max shoots back, yeah, if I was dead and it could help catch the murderer, I probably would. But the guidance counselor elects to have the police handle that matter. Max isn't willing to do that, though. She has to use the bathroom and snakes the woman's keys to her office. She rushes out of the house, and her, Steve, and Dustin head over to the school to try to find out anything they can on Chrissy. As they're heading over there, though, they get radioed by Lucas. Lucas has been completely out of the loop, so Dustin has to fill him in on the fact that they found Eddie and where he's at. Because of the basketball team, Lucas is convinced that Eddie killed Chrissy, and it leads to Dustin and Lucas going back and forth on why Eddie is innocent. Until finally Max grabs the radio and says, Lucas, you know nothing. Meet us at the school, we'll explain later. Lucas explains, though, that he can't because something bad's about to go down, and he has to hop off the radio because he is seen by the basketball team. The basketball team is still on the hunt for Dustin and Eddie, But Lucas decides to do his part, telling them that he found a clue on where Eddie is, and he leads Jason and his group to Hopper's cabin. Of course, Eddie isn't there, and while Jason is searching around for him in the dark, Lucas runs out of there. At this point, Robin and Nancy continue to look over news articles, but they aren't finding anything. And Nancy's ready to give up because Robin is just pissing her off. But Robin realizes that it might be because Nancy thinks that Robin and Steve are a thing. It's something that even Dustin noticed, how protective Steve was of Nancy. Robin has to assure Nancy that they aren't a thing, their relationship is completely platonic, and that she really didn't think Nancy would care because her and Jonathan are still a thing. Nancy, of course, tells her that it doesn't matter to her at all, but it clearly does. They start looking for more news footage, and that's when they find news for the Weekly Watcher. It's basically the equivalent of the National Enquirer, just crazy stories. But it's a place that they should look because they're looking for a story about monsters. And sure enough, Robin is able to find a story about Victor Creel who claimed that an ancient demon killed his family. The family moved into this gorgeous house, but Victor thought the house was possessed. He tried to get an exorcism, but it didn't catch, and that just pissed off the demon even more. The demon then murdered his family and removed the eyes. Victor believed he was spared as a punishment, and that's when they realized that this is the most likely explanation. This story is crazy, and Victor was declared mentally insane because of it. And sure enough, in the Upside Down, that is exactly where Vecna lives. He sits there, searching for his next victim, planting the seed until he eventually kills them. And by the way, one of his victims looks like it's going to be one of Lucas's basketball teammates. But it also might be another familiar face. As the girls leave the library, Robin radios Dustin to let him know on what they found. He then lets them know that they need to head to the school immediately because the group broke in. Max is able to get into the guidance counselor's office, but to her surprise, she not only finds Chrissy's file, she finds Fred's as well. She had no idea Fred was also seeing the guidance counselor, and when she opens up the file, they have matching symptoms. Headaches, nosebleeds, trauma, nightmares. But the problem is, those symptoms also match what Max is going through. And that's when Max suddenly hears Vecna's voice. Max suddenly finds herself in the hallway where there is a clock stuffed into the wall. It's the same clock that Chrissy and Fred saw. And then she hears Vecna's voice from behind her say her name. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.